Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Joe Emilio Show. I am here, as promised, with Ernst Roets from Afriforum. Ernst, how are you doing?
Joe, I'm doing well in yourself. Good to be
I'm,
here.
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time. I know you're a very, very busy man. You've been traveling and doing things always, and
Uh,
that's exactly what I want to speak to you about. Let's start with CPAC. Am I pronouncing it correctly? CPAC.
yeah, that's
Okay.
it.
So tell us, I don't know if anyone who's watching now has seen your, I think it was a 10-minute speech, which by the way was amazing. I watched it. Let's start with this. What is CPAC?
Okay, well, so CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Conference. That is it's an American conference. It's been in America since the 70s, I think 78 or something. I can't remember the exact year. And it's been sort of, I don't think officially, but sort of the political conference of the Republican Party. But the point is not so much to be a conference for the party, but to be a conference for conservative ideas, of which the Republican Party, of course, which would of course resonate more with the Republican Party. And it's been going on for a while, and it's a very big conference. It's the biggest conservative political conference in the world. In America, they've had speakers. Ronald Reagan was one of their main speakers for years. Various American presidents, George W. Bush, Donald Trump was the keynote speaker for the last few conferences. And I attended CPAC in Washington in 2020, and it was attended by about 20 to 30,000 people, if I recall. So it's a massive conference. It's like a rock show, in a way. And they have started taking it abroad to take the conference to other countries. And there has already been CPACs in Japan, South Korea, Australia, Brazil. Um, I'm not sure if there has been one in Jerusalem yet, in Israel, or if they're planning to host one, but it's in the running. And then this was actually the first one in Europe ever that they hosted now, and they decided to host it in Hungary for various reasons. And I was privileged enough to be invited to be a speaker at this conference.
Fantastic, man. That's awesome. It sounds like a party I'd also want to go to be honest. I saw that you rubbed shoulders with some very, the wokes of Twitter would say, the white supremacists of the world, even though
Yeah,
some of these people are
yeah,
black. But
yeah, exactly.
I saw a picture with you and what's her name? Oh, how can I?
Candace.
Yes, Candace Owens. Yes.
Yes.
What was it like meeting her, man?
Oh, Candace is great. I'm a bigger fan of her having met her than I was before, just because she's so down to earth. She's so approachable. She's friendly. So that's I've said this to people at the office as well. That I mean, having the opportunity to speak at this conference was amazing. But if I had to trade the opportunity, if I had to lose the opportunity to have been a speaker or the opportunity to have backstage access, I would lose the opportunity to be a speaker, because having that backstage access, I was able to meet speakers from all around the world, and people like Candace Owens. And I can tell you, she was due to speak the morning, um, and it was fairly quiet backstage actually. And she was sitting on the couch, and she was talking with Matt Schlapp, I think, if I recall, who's the chairperson of the American Conservative Union. That's the organization that hosts CPAC. And I know Matt Schlapp. I've already met him. So I went to introduce myself, and I said to Candace, listen, I just want to introduce myself. And I told her who I am, and I told her a bit about AfriForum and about South Africa. And I said to her that I'm not aware if she knows this, but she has a very big following in South Africa. A lot of people in South Africa really appreciate the work she's doing, and I could see. I mean, you can see from someone's face if they really appreciate something that you're saying, or if they're just having a conversation just to be polite. And I could really see that she was engaging. So she actually stood up, and we chat for, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. And we spoke about South Africa for the whole 5 minutes and what's happening in South Africa. And she really seemed interested. And yeah, that's it. And I also met her husband who was there, and but obviously not only Candace. I met quite a few speakers, especially people from think tank, researchers, and journalists from all over the world. So it was a great opportunity.
Did you are you gonna have are you gonna interview Candace anytime soon?
Well, no, it's not in the running. But what I can say is that I mean, I don't want to speak on her behalf or create any expectations in her absence. But we did discuss the idea of she coming to South
Oh
Africa,
wow.
visiting South Africa, and when she comes or if she comes, that she can come just for holiday, but also if she's open to bring a camera crew with her to interview some people. I just said to her that we'd love to help to make sure that she gets in touch with the right people. So I hope
Yeah.
it works out, but it's not like we discussed it as a
Yeah,
plan. It
yeah,
was sort of an idea that we discussed.
yeah. Just like a yeah, would be cool kind of thing. No, I get you.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So, is there anyone else? Like, did you meet who is it? Like, for example, Matt Walsh or anyone else from Daily Wire, or did you meet Donald Trump?
Yeah,
Was there
Matt
any?
Walsh wasn't there. I met quite a few people. I met people from all over the world, so it wasn't only Americans. But from America, I met Ben Ferguson, the podcast host and radio host. Quite a few. There was a group of the New York Young Republicans, which I found very insightful. We had dinner together, or at one of the dinner events, me and my colleagues were seated with the New York Young Republicans. And what was great about them is actually that they knew who I was and they knew who Afriforum was before we met. So it was quite a surprise when one of them came up to me and said, "Oh yeah, we know who you are. You are Ernst Roets, and we know about Afriforum, and we know about your
Nice.
case." And so they've been following from New York, and we had a great chat. And something that I thought was quite funny. People might have seen this on Twitter. So at this dinner, I was seated next to Gavin Wax, who's the president of the New York Young Republicans, and we were having a conversation, and someone and we were actually talking about South African politics and American politics, and someone took a picture of the two of us, and he asked me if he can tweet the picture, and I said, yeah, sure, and I said to him, tweet it, and then I'll retweet it, and then I sort of said to him, well, just be warned, I've got basically the whole EFF membership following me on Twitter. So if I retweet it, some people will reply and will tell you that I'm some white supremacist or something. And he said, well, don't worry about that. And so he tweeted the picture, and then I retweeted it. And like one of the first comments was someone who said, look, Ernst is having dinner with a white supremacist. And so they actually, so they didn't know who he was. They just attacked him because, he was having dinner with me. So he must be some form of it. I mean, obviously it's EFF folks, so you don't need to take that seriously. But the great thing on a sort of more serious note is that people can see through this. People aren't concerned about when people trash talk you on Twitter anymore.
Yeah.
But maybe, sorry, just to get back to your question. So I met quite a few people. I met the leadership of Vlaams Belang, the Flemish party, which I really enjoyed talking with them. And Flemish, for those who don't know, is so close to Afrikaans. It's closer to Afrikaans than Dutch. So we could speak to each other. I could speak Afrikaans, and they could speak Flemish, and so forth. People from Jerusalem who were there, the American, not the Australian CPAC people who were there, obviously Hungarians. I was able to meet quite a few people in the Hungarian government. And there were people from all over the world, from South Korea, and what was great from England as well. What was great about this conference is after my speech and just in engaging with people there, I was invited to speak at 5 conferences all
Oh,
over the world.
nice.
So I just need to follow up on that. And I mean, speaking at conferences is great, but you can't just travel and speak at conferences all the time.
Yeah.
But it was a great opportunity to do some networking and meet people and talk
Yes.
about what's happening and so forth.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, after your speech, because it's a very powerful speech, and you dropped some truth bombs, and I think a lot of international folk may not know everything that happens in South Africa when it comes to farm murders, when it comes to farm attacks, when it comes to even, you called it out. You said the ANC are a communist or socialist party and stuff like that. And ANC internationally is labeled as like, the freedom fighter, or the liberating party
Liberation
or whatever.
movement.
Yeah, liberation movement and all that stuff. So was there anyone that came to you after your speech and was like, wow, is that really happening in South Africa?
Well, actually not, and that's good news, because that's one of the main conclusions I got from this trip. I mean, I've done a few lives and tours on behalf of Afriforum, and something that really stuck with me, a conclusion that I reached now, is it's not so much necessary to convince people that there's a serious problem in South Africa anymore. People know about this. They don't have all the detail, but people already know the ANC is a bad government. It's not the liberation movement, the party of Mandela, and so forth. A lot of people in the media, unfortunately, still would like us to believe that. And most people, when you meet people in the street, they know hardly anything about South Africa. Just aware that if you meet people in the street in South Africa, they would hardly know anything about Hungary, for example. So I'm not too concerned about that, but speaking with politicians and some more informed journalists who tend to be, not leftist journalists, and researchers and so forth, they all know there's a serious problem in South Africa. I think the challenge now is to get people to talk about South Africa, to be more outspoken about South Africa. And I can see, and that's another interesting observation that I got, is that there's a generational thing here as well, where older people tend to be more hesitant or careful to say, well, what's happening in South Africa is not right, or the ANC is screwing up the country. And I think it's because they think about the political baggage of the 1990s and the 80s and so forth. But younger people tend to be much more open to say, well, listen, we need to do something, and we need to talk about what's happening in South Africa. And something that someone from, actually a Hungarian, who said to me that really stuck with me, was that his words were, South Africa is becoming an important civilizational battlefront, and we can't afford to keep silent. So they know, at least some people are waking up to the idea that the world should take note of what's happening in South Africa, because as we've been saying to people, in a way, South Africa is very far behind the rest of the world, but in a way we are ahead, because we're experiencing problems now that America might experience in 10 years from now, and England might experience, and so forth. So, and I think the point that people should take lessons from South Africa is it resonates with people, which is good news.
Yeah, that is good news. I'm very glad to hear it, because people like yourself, other channels, one of them mentioned earlier, guys like Big Daddy Liberty and Ramon and others, Ernst Roets, have been trying to tell the world for the longest time, hey, things are not cool in South Africa. Like, so it's good to know that everyone, AfriForum, everyone included, our messages are being heard. It's good to hear that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I can, if I can plug Roman Kabanak in his absence. So someone in Hungary actually came up to me and said, go and ask the guy from the morning shot. No, they actually knew him mentioned him by name. They said, go and ask Roman Kabanak why he's been so quiet lately. So it's good to see. It's good to see that people are following the YouTube channels from South Africa.
That's fascinating, though. That's really fascinating. That's
again,
awesome.
I'm not trying to say that it's everyone in Hungary or all over the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, but at least people are taking note that there's some stuff happening in South Africa that is of importance to the rest of the world. So people who are interested are taking more note, which is a good thing. And I think social media and alternative media is playing an immensely important role in that regard.
Absolutely. Speaking about alternative media, AfriForum has its own YouTube channel, and I encourage people to go subscribe to that, because you guys are doing something very interesting and very, very I would say noble, because you're actually documenting your court cases, at least the ones that you can document and that you're allowed to document. You literally stream the entire thing. And
Yeah.
today was a very important day, I think, for one of AfriForum's court cases, which is it was the closing arguments of AfriForum versus EFF, Julius Malema, and Kill the Boer saga, as I call it.
Yep.
What is it that you can share with us that happened today in court?
Yeah, well, firstly about the court cases, so just so people know, people might be interested to know that you can't just live stream a court case. You can't just take cameras into the court. You're not allowed to actually, unless the judge gives explicit permission. And it's quite a process. You have to file a formal application with the court through your lawyers to get permission to film the proceedings, to have a camera inside court, or to live stream or whatever. You have to be very explicit in what you intend to do. So sometimes we can't do it in all court cases, but especially the ones that we believe are more bigger picture court cases that the public should take note of, or public interest court cases, you could say. We have been doing that, and it's been doing very well, to live stream the entire court case. So today, and we've done it with this case. We did it with the firearms case against Julius Malema for shooting the rifle at the political gathering of, I think it was the EFF's fifth birthday celebrations, and it's been doing well. So today was the final arguments, and what that basically means is we've had almost 2 weeks in court in February, where all the witnesses were called and the evidence was led and so forth. And today was set aside for the legal teams to come back to present their final arguments. So it's to summarize based on the evidence that was led and to say, well, this is why we think we should win. And I think it went well. The day was very long, and I'm grateful to the judge for that, because we were going overtime, and the judge's view was, we're going overtime, but that's fine. Let's wrap everything up. Let's keep going until we finish, instead of booking another day, which will, have an impact on legal costs and programs and scheduling and so forth. So I don't know. I think we left just after 5 or something when we were supposed to leave at 3, I think. But so we finished now, and so a few things stood out in terms of the final arguments. One thing that's important for people to know is that the test, or the question of whether something is hate speech, does not depend on whether it actually leads to violence. So we've been leading testimony about farm attack victims to tell their stories and so forth. And we had someone from AfriForums trauma unit to testify. And the point of that, as we've said from the beginning, is it's not to try to prove a link between Malema singing the song and now they go and murder the people because Malema sang the song. But it's to prove that, or to show that the song causes harm, which includes psychological harm. So part of what one of the points we made was that was about the impact of someone who was a victim of a farm attack, or Duncan Prinsloo, who testified, for example, whose wife was murdered next to him during the farm attack in bed. And so he testified what goes through his head. What does he think when he sees Malema going up onto a public platform chanting, "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer"? So Malema's legal team made the argument that we were not able to prove a direct link. I would say that we did prove a direct link, but and what I mean by that is I testified about the extent to which we have found farm attacks and farm murders increase after high-profile cases of hate speech. But the question of whether we prove the link is actually irrelevant, because that's not the question of whether something is hate speech. So that was a point of argument today. And then there was what I regard as a weird argument by Malema's legal team, claiming on the principle of res judicata, that how do you explain? Basically, the argument was that there was no point of us being in court because the matter has been settled before. It's a principle of not being able to go to court twice on the same issue. So the argument was, yes, well, because this has been in court already in 2011. And
So
then Mark Oppenheimer explained that, well, it's like if you beat your wife and you go to court, and then after that you beat your wife again, you can go to court again. What you can't do is you can't, if you beat your wife and you go to court, and you win or you lose, doesn't matter. You can't be taken to court again for the same incident, but this is a new incident. So I don't think that was a particularly strong argument. And then I would say their main line today was to try and discredit all the witnesses we led. So they were claiming that everything I said in court should be rejected because I'm not an expert. They were saying that the trauma counselor who testified on behalf of Afriforum, everything he said should be rejected because it was hearsay and he didn't disclose the. So he was testifying about his, the psychological impact on the victims, and then they were saying, well, that's hearsay. So they were arguing that the two victims who testified should be rejected because it's not relevant. And so they went through that. That's basically their line, trying to attack all the victims. So it was basically a technical legal argument. But I'm still optimistic. I think it went well. I think Mark Oppenheimer did particularly well, and I think what stood out to me in the court case as a whole was the cross-examination of Julius Malema. What came out there, and the point is that it's true that when you deal with hate speech, it has to be seen within context. And the point here is the context is the comments made by Julius Malema in testimony under oath that he feels nothing for the victims of farm murders, that he's not able to express any sympathy with the victims, that he condones the singing of the song by EFF members, that he might one day call for white people to be slaughtered, and he made this whole list of these atrocious comments. And so I think that really, I think he won the case for us. I mean, we'll wait for judgment. We don't know, but I'm optimistic. Obviously, you can never predict a court case,
yeah.
but if I had to predict, I would say I'm sure we'll win this case.
Well, I hope so. I mean, something needs to be done. I've always said, when I was following earlier with the 2-week trial and posting some of the clips, the important ones, the ones that you just mentioned, everyone that was watching, everyone in the live chats was saying, like, this is hate speech. Like, any normal human being with a conscience can see that what he says leads to violence in some shape or form, and it's disgusting to me that he can dismiss the feelings and emotions of human beings who have gone through a very traumatic experience. I mean, as bad as some of these farm murders are and attacks, and Ernst, you have all people in South Africa will know how horrible these attacks are. I wouldn't wish that to happen to Malema. I know that sounds weird for me to say because some people,
Yeah, of course.
Some people would happily try and repay, eye for an eye, but I don't want that. I don't think that that's how we should have the mentality, that kind of mentality. He does deserve to have, justice served for the things that he said, but he didn't necessarily do it himself. I mean, he says things, people act on that. Those people that do those horrible things need to be held accountable.
Yep.
But as for a man like Julius, who is dangerous, in my opinion, especially when you have the power that he has, the influence that he has, you do have to be held responsible for the things that you say. And and I think and I hope that the judge presiding will also view it that way. That this is not just a random person on a soapbox in the middle of Johannesburg who has 3 people listening to him saying, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. This is a man that is heard internationally on sometimes the grandest stage. And he needs to be held accountable. That's my opinion. But I do want to ask you one thing. I know I'm not asking you to character bash or anything like that, but come on, I really want to know what your opinion is specifically on the what was it? That lady that they got to examine the song.
Oh, Professor Gunner.
Yes. Now,
Yes.
There were some great moments from her too. I mean, was there any specific moment where you were like, oh come on, like you can't? Because she also refused to answer point blank questions, simple yes or no or whatever, and she was going around and trying to avoid, and she knew that if she answered it, it would break down the ideology and her whole
Yep.
thesis. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that witness?
Yeah, well, she was actually in court today to come and listen to the final arguments, and our legal team argued that she was not a credible witness, and it was quite bizarre to listen to her testimony. So I remember at one stage, fairly in the beginning, Advocate Oppenheimer asked her, "Could is it possible for a song to lead to violence?" And she responded and she said, "I know what you're trying to do and I'm not going to play along."
Yes.
And so the point is, it doesn't matter what the advocate is trying to do. I mean, you're an expert on songs and the significance thereof. So you're here to answer questions. And at some points, she just refused to answer questions, and she sort of looked at the judge as if she was waiting for the judge to intervene to
I
tell her
remember.
that she doesn't need to answer the questions. So the testimony was weird. It was strange. I don't think she did them any favors. And there was one part that I thought was also a bit funny was when she said that the she actually thinks the stem is a beautiful song. And so I immediately thought, well, what's Malema and the EFF leadership going to think about this witness of theirs coming to testify about the stem being a beautiful song? So I'm not sure if she's too popular with them. But yeah, I think it was really weird listening to her testimony, and she might be a great lady. I don't know. I don't know her personally. I haven't spoken with her. I just think I said hello and goodbye. But it was really, really bizarre to listen. And people can go back. It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Go and listen to her testimony. It was really out of this world. It's a strange thing to experience.
I gotta admit, man, there were some people, I think the first day of interrogating Julius Malema, Mark Oppenheimer was cross-examining, really. A lot of people were like, oh, Mark is a failure. He's not going after Malema. He's not doing, like, I think people wanted a more aggressive Mark, but he was calm, collect, and strategic. And it was only really in the second day that you started to see why Mark was, acting, or not acting, but like doing it the way he was doing it, because I feel like the more calm he was, the more angry Julius got. I feel like the more relaxed he was, the more he allowed Julius to kind of show his true colors. Would you agree with that? Do you agree with the way that Mark handled the cross-examination?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing with public cases like this is sometimes it's annoying, but you get criticism that I think you don't deserve. So in the 1940s, I think 43, if I recall, I can't remember the year. Um, Jan Smuts, who of course the Boer War general who was advising Churchill, um, went to England and he spoke in the British Parliament, and he made a joke there. He was talking about the war, and it was around the time of D-Day, and the war was starting to turn in the Allies' favor. And he said, "Oh, I'm not going to discuss strategy with you today, because we'll leave strategy to the amateur strategists who don't have to run the risk of actually implementing what they believe should be done, and who also don't need to be confidential about their strategies." And it reminded me a bit about this case and cases like these. So, I mean, sure, people wanted fireworks from the get-go, but there was a particular and a deliberate strategy that was followed in the cross-examination, which we discussed beforehand, which was Malema was cross-examined for 2 days by Advocate Oppenheimer, and he started the cross-examination by just asking him general questions about EFF policy and getting him to talk, and why do you say this, and what about this, and just talking about the policy in a way to get him comfortable, but in another way to get him to say stuff that you can come back to afterwards and say, oh, well, now you've said this, but yesterday when you testified, you said the following. And then as it sort of drags out, to start to become more aggressive in the questioning. So it was a deliberate strategy, but I think it's just part of the game when something like this is live streamed, that, you know, people will comment and say, oh, well, what are you doing? And why didn't you ask this? And why didn't you say this? And if our approach was we were not playing for the bench.
Yeah.
And if we were trying to play for the bench, or for people watching, in the on the proverbial pavilion, we wouldn't win the case. So
Yeah.
it's a balancing act, but
Yeah.
well, it's not a balancing act. It's a negative consequence that you have to. We just have to know that this is the reality, that people are going to comment, and people are emotionally invested in the case. So I don't blame people for becoming upset or becoming excited and whatever, because people also have an interest in the outcome of this case.
Well, I absolutely, you're 100% correct on that, and I try to manage expectations, because I'm also part of a legal battle, and it's dragging on. The legal system is very slow in South Africa, and I actually poked a little bit of fun at those that were saying those kind of comments, because I was like, guys, what do you expect Mark to do? Do you expect him to be like in the TVs where he's like, Your Honor, this man deserves to be condemned for the rest of his life, and it's not. It's not the movies. It's not how it works.
And we don't have the American system with lawyers walking up and down in court and all of that. So we were joking about that. There's that scene in The Dark Knight where Harvey Dent prosecutes this one criminal. And then the guy pulls out a gun and he tries to shoot he's busy testifying, and he tries to shoot the prosecutor, and then the gun backfires, and then the prosecutor grabs the gun, and I think he sort of dismantles it. He says something like, "You should have bought American," and he bashes the gun on the table, and it's like the typical American Hollywood fireworks. Firstly, the American system is a bit complex in the sense that different states have different systems, but we don't have. Our system is not like that at all, and I don't think it's good. I don't think that type of spectacled court cases is necessarily good for actually getting justice done in a matter. But we don't have that type of system, so people shouldn't watch movies and expect court cases in South Africa to look like that. Or what's the Few Good Men, as you can't handle the truth, that type of thing. It's just not the way the law works, at least in South Africa.
Well, I think in general, I mean, even if you watch, some of the American court, like if you watch the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp, some of those clips, it's boring. It's not. I mean, there are some funny moments because it's Johnny Depp, but most of it's boring. Court in general is boring. But I was glued to the live stream. I found it very interesting. I was captivated, and I know that's weird to say, because anybody who goes to watch it, they will be bored. Like, no offense to anyone who's in the courtroom, but it's long, it's lengthy. There's a lot of things going on, and a lot of questions over and over, and people get impatient. But I mean, when you slowly start to see that strategy unfolding, and the one that lady, I mean, at one point I pointed out how she was breathing very heavily, like you could she was panicking.
She was sort of shaking.
She was panicking, and those are the moments that I was like, yes.
But that's exactly, you're right. So you need to follow the case to be able to pick up moments like that. And I mean, you mentioned that, just for context, you mentioned the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. That's a good example of a particular state where the legal process is much more toned down. It's not like the example I mentioned, people walking up and down in court. And I think it's for people who followed that, I think it's a better system. It was very structured. You know what's going on. So that actually was a bit closer to our system, even though they had a jury and we don't have a jury system in South Africa. But I think it's better to have an orderly process.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to chat to you a bit about your other case, the flag case. I haven't been able to keep a close eye on it, unfortunately. But is there any updates you can give us on what's happening with that court case?
Yes. So that case was argued in the Supreme Court of Appeals, and we're awaiting judgment now. So we'll see what happens. Just some context about the case. It's a difficult case for us to do as AfriForum, and we obviously discussed this. And it's a bit of a PR challenge because it's so easy to misconstrue why AfriForum is involved with that case. And an interesting thing that I think a lot of people don't know, we were actually added to that case by the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We did not become involved on our own accord. And so what happened, they filed an application for the flag to be banned. And AfriForum's position has always been that, we don't display the flag. If people, I think it's happened probably twice in the last 10, 15 years, where we would have an event and someone shows up with the flag, and then we would tell that person to put it away. So we believe that, the way to deal with this issue is through dialogue, through social interaction, rather than just banning it. Because because it doesn't comply with the definition of hate speech. So it's not an incitement to violence. If you display the flag and you combine that with a message to say let's go and assault black people or whatever, then it's hate speech, obviously. But just displaying a flag, even if it's offensive, or displaying a symbol, even if it's offensive, that just doesn't comply with the definition of hate speech. But so what happened in this case is the Nelson Mandela Foundation filed the application for the flag to be declared as hate speech. And then they did something that was either very malicious or very ignorant, but they added AfriForum as a respondent to the matter. And they said the reason why is because AfriForum is displaying the flag. And AfriForum, they claim, displayed the flag at the Black Monday protests in 2016. And so they said, well, since AfriForum are sort of the champions of waving the old flag, we have to add them, to this case so they can defend their position. And we could have, so we had to make a decision. We could have said, well, we're just not going to become involved. But they were telling the world that we've been displaying the flag, which we haven't done. So part of the reason why we became involved in that case is to explain our position. Or no, let me put it differently. Part of the reason why we didn't step out of that case after we've been added is because we needed to explain what our position actually is. And another reason is that that we believe it doesn't comply with the definition of hate speech. And it's very clear that AfriForum does not display the flag, and we discourage people from displaying it. And there's a good quote on this, which I've mentioned a few times before, by Douglas Murray, the British commentator, who said, the problem with fighting for free speech is you never get to do it on the grounds you would have hoped for. Because it's never necessary to fight for free speech when something is not controversial. It's only necessary to fight for free speech when something is controversial. And our view on that has always been quite consistent, that free speech is very important, and there is such a thing as hate speech that has to be combated. But hate speech is not when something is offensive. Hate speech is when something targets a group of people based on their identity, such as their ethnicity or religion, and it is then combined with some form of a call to action to inflict violence on that community, or to inflict harm on them, or to cause harm for that community. Then it's hate speech. So that's the whole point. That's why chanting "kill the boer, kill the farmer" is hate speech, but displaying a flag is not hate speech. So it's a principled case. We're waiting for judgment. It is a difficult case to pursue, but it's important nonetheless.
Yeah, I gotta admit, Ernst, I'm a bit on the fence with the flag scenario because, I don't know if this is true, but I've been told by friends that the Nazi flag is banned. Is that true? I think you would know that.
In Germany, yes.
In Germany, it's banned. So I imagine that the reason why the Nazi flag is banned is because it's offensive to some Germans. I'm guessing. I'm not sure exactly why they banned it. I'm guessing it's for other reasons, like to suppress the Nazis, and I don't know what. So could the same argument not be made for the AfriForum? Oh, sorry. Whoa, I caught myself there. Wow, almost misspoke heavily. For the apartheid flag, could the same argument not be made with the apartheid flag?
Well, I think that's what they are trying to do, but the same set of facts are not applicable. So I mean, I don't know. I didn't read the court case according to which the swastika was banned in Germany, but there are a few things different there. The first is that is a flag of a particular political movement. It's not the flag of the government or the former government. Another is that what happened in Nazi Germany was 6 million people were killed in concentration camps. They had extermination camps and a deliberate policy of exterminating an entire nation and more. And yes, I mean what happened under apartheid was people's human rights were violated and people's dignity was violated and a lot of atrocious things happened. But it's not in any way comparable to what happened in Nazi Germany. So one argument, I mean, it's strange that we have to the zeitgeist in this country is of such. So, for example, what I just said to you, people will say, "Oh, okay, so your position is apartheid was not that bad."
No, that's not what you're saying. That's not what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing with the discussion about apartheid is you can say anything you want, regardless of whether it's factual or not, as long as it's in a particular direction. And when you come out and say, "Whoa, listen, it was bad," but it wasn't exactly what you were saying it is. It wasn't a policy of extermination camps. It was a policy of it categorized people according to skin color, and it said, well, here's where the whites are going to live, and here's where the blacks are going to live, and it's still something that shouldn't have happened. But it's not comparable to Nazism. So we cannot say because the Nazi flag is banned, therefore the the former South African government flag should be banned. I don't think it's the same. But that was part of what was argued in court.
And also, I think another point which a lot of people are pointing out in the comments is it's not the apartheid flag. It's actually South Africa country's flag, which is also correct.
The flag was accepted in 1928, and the apartheid system only started in 1948. And apartheid actually ended in 1990 when the ANC was unbanned and so forth. So it was the South African flag before apartheid and after apartheid. So there's truth in that. To say it's not, it could be misleading to just call it the apartheid flag.
Isn't that a fact that might strengthen your case, though? I mean, technically saying, it's the South African flag, really, not the apartheid flag, as some people are calling it.
Yes, and apartheid was a policy of the former South African government. The same way you could say EWC is a policy position of the current South African government, but the South African flag today is not the EWC flag.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a long argument to be made about that, but it was argued in court, and we'll see what the Supreme Court of Appeal has to say about it. So we're awaiting their judgment.
Yeah. Look, I'm as you mentioned, I think it's very important to mention this. Is to make your position and AfriForums' position very clear on this. Is that you don't necessarily support the display of the old South African flag at your events or in your offices or anything like that. So you guys, just AfriForum themselves, actually don't like the flag. It's fair to say.
Yeah, well, we're telling people not to display the flag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not at AfriForum events. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe just to add, but part of the problem with this case is, in the initial judgment, it was said that even if you display the flag in the privacy of your bedroom, it's still hate speech.
But nobody's going to know.
So if I have, I mean, it's not combined with a call to action or anything like we discussed. If I have a little, photo frame on my my nightstand and there's a picture of the old South African flag, then I should be liable for hate speech. I mean, obviously it's bizarre. It's bizarre for the state or the government to try to regulate what people display in their bedrooms. Not even what they do in their bedrooms. It's just what they display, what you can see when you walk into someone's bedroom, and that's hate speech. So if the initial ruling was more mellow or more realistic, we might have a different take on it. But that's part of the problem that we have currently.
Yeah, and again, I just want to make it clear because I'll get a lot of people surprised for some reason when I say that I support AfriForum and what they do, and then one of the biggest things they point out to me is like, oh, but AfriForum supports the apartheid flag or the old South African flag. How can you support? And I'm like, they actually don't. Like, they don't like the flag. They're standing on a different principle, and then I've got to explain the principle. So I'm actually just gonna clip some of the things you've said, and I'm just gonna send it to them. But I just wanted to be clear for other people as well. Like, people need to understand that you guys are not some evil organization trying to bring back apartheid. You're far from it. Far from it. There's so many other great things that AfriForum has done, and if you just do a bit of research, people will find it. And screw that. Even just go on AfriForum's website, if you are brave enough. Not that there's anything wrong. And you can see you guys do posts and blogs all the time of what you guys are doing. You've helped people of all races and all ethnic groups and all that stuff. So I really encourage people to just research and don't listen to mainstream media. I mean, I know AfriForum isn't exactly tied to this or other organization, which is a Cape Forum. There's influence, I think, or partnership, but there's no, like, you're separate.
It's not a branch of AfriForum, but we do have, it's a friend of AfriForum.
Yes. Yeah. And immediately when Cape Forum came out, like, flipping 4 articles from one media outlet, News 24, about how white supremacy is taking over the Western Cape and racism is coming back and colonialism is coming back. And the hate for you guys is very strong. And I always say, if you're hated that much, you must be doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty strange. I mean, but in a way it's sad, because I really believe that it's good for society to have a strong media, to have media institutions with investigative journalists who go to press conferences to ask tough questions, and who investigate stories and have these expose corruption and stuff like that. And it's the same should go for AfriForum. The journalists should ask us difficult questions. But I mean, obviously, it's way past that with the media in South Africa, or the media generally, with journalists who are activists in the first place, masquerading as journalists, pretending to be neutral when they obviously have a particular ideological goal or a beef to pick with organizations with whose policies they disagree, and so forth. So it's sad what's happening, but it's also quite significant how the media world is shifting now. How newspapers don't have the influence they had earlier. If you read, especially history books about South Africa in the previous century, in the 20th century, it's striking how much influence newspaper editors had. Like, if you were the editor of The Star or Die Burger or Beeld or something, you were one of the most powerful people in the country, and it's just not the case anymore. I think News 24, and I mean, there are good journalists at News 24, I should say that. I'm not so sure if the editor is very good, or very objective, but I think someone like Adrian Basson is still, it's a strong news outlet. So I think I'm not sure if he feels safe in terms of his career and his media institution. I think I can see the institutions around them. Many of them are really struggling, and News 24 as well. I mean, the numbers are going down in terms of readers and so forth. People are just getting their news directly from the source, not so much from a traditional I've heard people use the word legacy media, like not from a traditional news outlet, and I think part of the problem is just technology, but another part of the problem is people are losing faith in the media because of, I would say, a handful, a small group of journalists who have really gone off the rails in trying to push ideological points and trying to present themselves as being neutral, which just leads to people losing faith in the media.
Well, in my opinion, South African media is captured, and that's just my opinion. But one thing I will say, and I want to just comment on this, and then we'll go straight into some questions, because I know you got to go at 9 sharp. So I interviewed Barry Bateman, and it was exciting to hear him jumping on board to AfriForum and stuff like that. Do you correspond with Barry very often? Have you spoken with him recently? How's he doing? How's he finding himself in that new AfriForum position?
Yeah, Barry is great. I'm glad to see that he's excited about joining AfriForum, and we're obviously excited about him joining AfriForum. I've always regarded him as one of the best journalists in the country. He was always when I would like I did just now when I would say they are really good journalists. We should remember that Barry Bateman was one of the people I would think of when I said, well, remember that they are really good journalists, and we should be grateful for what they're doing. And so Barry Bateman is particularly with the private prosecutions unit, working with Advocate Gerry Nel to communicate about what the team is doing, what's happening with the court cases, because there's a whole bunch of dozens of cases that they're involved with, and it's quite a challenge to keep people updated about all the cases and where it's going, and to also manage expectations, because people you become involved with a court case and people would like the matter to be heard the next week, and then the week thereafter they want a judgment. And then the week thereafter they want to see someone in prison, and oftentimes it takes up to 5 years or something. So Barry's role is to communicate that. And yes, I actually haven't seen him in a while, because that's partly because I was in Europe now. But we do communicate, and he's Barry. I don't know if people have seen that on social media. He's a very enthusiastic braaier. He's very good at braaiing. So we every time I braai at my place, I would send Barry a picture and say, well, this is what I've been braaiing tonight, and Barry would send me whatever he's doing. So yeah, he's great. I really like Barry. And I actually had an interview, a conversation with him also about him joining AfriForum, which is, I think it's on my YouTube channel, AfriForums. It was published like 2 weeks ago or something.
Yeah, it's on yours.
Where he talks about why he joined and what he's doing and so forth. So yeah, people can go and watch that.
Yeah, please do. It's a very interesting conversation between the two of you. You guys seem like old friends. You actually mentioned in that interview how long you guys have actually known each other. So it's a very interesting conversation. All right. So before I let you go, Ernst, let's like some of the questions that have been coming through. One that seems very important. I'm not familiar with it, but perhaps you are. Apparently, there's a GBV case, Nicoline's case. What is the process that is going to be followed there? That's the question. I'm not sure if you...
I just need to make sure, which case is that? Is that the Jaco Swart case?
Helen, yeah, let us know.
If it is, I'll answer. So part of the problem there, and that's why the videos were released now, is that the court refused to admit the videos where you can actually see him beating up his wife as evidence. So he was found guilty with 20,000, and he was fined 20,000 rand, and I think 5 years suspended prison sentence. So he doesn't go to prison unless he commits crime again. And our concern is it was shockingly inappropriate. Because if you look at the videos, my first view of that was, it's not even assault to commit grievous bodily harm. That to me looked like attempted murder, the way he was beating up his wife. It's really, really disgusting. I was at a loss for words when I saw those clips. So that's part of the reason why the videos was released. So if the court doesn't want to look at the videos, I think the public should see what's going on and who this guy is. So the videos were released. It's all over social media. And then it transpired that he's been involved with quite a few other assault cases and cases of violence. Apparently he's hiding now, according to his lawyer. He's in hiding at the moment.
Not surprised.
But he will be charged, I'm quite sure. I'm sure he's going to go to court for some of the other cases that he has been involved with, which would be to his detriment. And I think he's now well known, and his picture is well known. So I'm sure if something like this happens again, whoever the victim is would hopefully find it a little bit easier to speak out. Because I mean it must be very difficult if you're a woman and you're married and your wife and your husband at least is this big strong guy and he keeps beating you up. It must be very difficult. I can't imagine how hard it must be, but I'm sure that there will be justice in this case. Even if it wasn't for the case that was heard by the courts up to now, but in some of the future cases, I'm sure this guy will face the consequences.
I'm sure of it too, no doubt. And then Matthew had a question for you earlier. Did you meet Ron DeSantis at the CPAC?
No, obviously I would love to meet Ron DeSantis, but he wasn't at this conference.
All right.
He actually spoke at CPAC, but not at this one in Hungary. I think he spoke at the previous one that was earlier this year in, was it Washington or Florida? I can't recall. It might have been Florida. But no, I haven't met him. I'd love to meet him, but I haven't met him.
Okay. And then Red Sky Alice is saying, had a two-part question for you. What recourse will AfriForum take if the outcome is negative? This is in regard to the AfriForum versus EFF, Julius Malema. And what about taking this to ICC?
Yeah, so we spoke about that today. It depends. It's difficult to say in advance what we'll do because that would depend on the judgment. It would depend on the line of reasoning given by the court and what exactly the court says. So it's not a simple. The court doesn't have to give a simple yes or no. He has to, the judge has to argue the matter, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that he needs to decide. So we'll decide, but we'll look at that and then we decide. But the option is always there to appeal. So this was the South Gauteng High Court, which means you can appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeals in Bloemfontein. Because it's a constitutional matter, there is the option of, from the Supreme Court of Appeals, you can then appeal to the Constitutional Court. But because this is a constitutional matter, there's also the option of taking your appeal directly to the Constitutional Court. So there's legal options that we will consider. The ICC is a bit difficult for a case like this because this is not a criminal case. It's the Equality Court, so it's much more akin to a civil case. But the thing with the Equality Act and the Equality Court is it's almost not really a civil case, but it's not really a criminal case. It's sort of something unique, but it's much closer to a civil case than a criminal case. So in other words, if you get found guilty, it's not that you have a criminal record. You haven't committed, hate speech is not a crime, although incitement to violence is a crime. And what we're arguing is that the matter, part of what we're asking the court to do is to refer the matter to the prosecuting authority for prosecution as well.
Okay.
And maybe I should just add this. I don't think I said this earlier. What we also argue today is that the matter should be referred for prosecution also for perjury, because Malema testified in court and he was deliberately asked this question from different angles, and he was consistent in his answer that he does not have any money and the EFF does not have any money. So he was arguing this because he wants the court not to rule that they should make a payment, and so he said he doesn't have any money and the EFF doesn't have any money. And just at first glance, that seems like perjury, like lying under oath, because we know the EFF gets big donations from whoever, from a bunch of donors, and from Malema's lifestyle, we can reasonably conclude that he seems to have a lot of money. And now he comes under oath and he testifies in court that he doesn't have any money. So we asked the court to refer. The court can't. We're not asking the court to find him guilty of perjury, but we did ask the court to refer the matter for prosecution because he might have committed perjury. So that's also an avenue that we're looking at.
Awesome. And then very quickly, do you have any idea when the judgment will happen? The judge judgment.
I hope soon, but the judge sort of made a joke towards the end of the day saying that he doesn't want anyone to ask him by next week, Wednesday, when are we going to get the judgment. And he said that we have to remember that he has some other cases that he has already dealt with that he still needs to give judgment in. So this sort of goes into the end of the line. But the judge seemed to me to be quite was focused on the case and quite prepared. So he got there this morning saying, listen, I have read all of the documents, everything you've submitted since we've been here the last time. So you don't need to go through all the detail. I have read it and I have read them attentively. So I'm thinking it will be quicker than usual, but it can be months. I mean, we've had court cases where we actually had to wait for a year for judgment, which is very sad. It shouldn't be like that. But I think it's reasonable to say, if I had to guess, I would say somewhere towards the end of the year, we'll get a judgment. Might be next year. I hope not. Hopefully
Yeah,
quicker.
jeez.
Hopefully a month or two from now.
Yeah, unfortunately, the justice system here in South Africa is slow.
Very slow. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, Ernst, it is almost 9 o'clock, so let's wrap it up here. I want to thank you so much once again for joining me on the show. Definitely have you back when
Yeah.
probably when we know more about what's going on. You know, with the flag. Also, I wanted to ask you about the gun, but we'll leave that for another time. The gun case that you guys are doing, and many other cases you guys have going on. There's always a reason to
Yeah.
have you on and chat. So, Ernst, before we go, do you want to tell people where they can find you? By the way, your Twitter page is linked in the description below if people want to give you a follow. But tell people where else they can find you.
Well, it's most important for people to find AfriForum,
Yeah.
which is on social media and on all the, I think AfriForum is even on TikTok, although I'm too old for TikTok. I heard AfriForum is on TikTok and I've seen some of the videos. But I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I tweet more than I post on Facebook, but that's just the nature of Twitter. But yeah, I think people can find me in all the usual places. I have a YouTube channel other than the AfriForum channel, so people can look me up there as well. And then on your show and shows like these,
Yeah.
people can also find me.
Awesome, Ernst. Once again, thank you so much for giving me an hour of your time. It was a pleasure chatting to you, and I can't wait to chat to you again. Good luck in all that you do, and good luck to AfriForum as well.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone who was watching and for all the comments and questions and everything.
Awesome. Have a good night, Ernst. Good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right.
You.
Cheers.